Hey, everybody. Welcome, 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 welcome. So glad to be here with all of you tonight. Should be a lovely stream. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. It's going to be a fun conversation here tonight. I'm looking forward to engaging with all of you. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell, and let's have a fun stream tonight.
Of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are heading into mid-December, and I am continuing to do our streams, and we are continuing to spread the truth in a world of lies, to engage, to debate, to put forward ideas, and that's great. That is very, very great, and I'm glad to have all of you here. Should be an interesting conversation tonight. I guess I'll do a quick rundown of community business. First things first, if you want to be part of our patrons only streams, we should be having one in the next week or so. You want to be part of our patrons only streams, sign up and join the Patreon. That is a great way to be involved in the community here. You get access to all kinds of different perks and benefits, and you get to join patrons only streams. On top of that, the Center for Political Innovation is back in business. We are operating, and if you would like to become a dues-paying member of the CPI, at this point we have 63 dues-paying members. By all means, sign up. We will be having a conference coming up in March. It'll be a great event. I'm very excited. There's also some public speaking seminars happening. People in the group are learning how to give classes and do socialist education on their own. That's very exciting as well. So yeah, very, very, very cool. So I just wanted to let people know about that. Trying to think if there's any other business announcements. Next, pretty soon, Peter Coffin has a new documentary coming out. That is going to be awesome. That's going to be really, really awesome. So I'll keep you updated on that. There's going to be a trailer pretty soon, and it's going to be great. It's really, really going to be great. So if you are into that, we'll be keeping you updated about Peter Coffin's new documentary, debunking the lie of overpopulation, the lie of limited resources, the Malthusian narrative that's pushed so hard by the synthetic left. So that's going to be pretty cool. Peter Coffin is a great friend of what we do. We love Peter Coffin. So yeah, that is going to be awesome. Trying to think if there's anything else that I need to announce at this time. I guess I'll wish everyone a happy holiday, even though we're approaching mid-December. I mean, we're not to the end of December yet, but I'm wishing everyone a happy holiday. A lot of exciting plans are in the works for the coming new year, and we are marching ahead. We are marching ahead, and we do not surrender. So welcome, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Now, the way these streams work is that I give my opening remarks where I comment on current events or I just say what I'm going to say. So the first half of the show is just me talking. But while I talk, I write down your super chat questions. So if there's something you want to ask me about, there's something you would like me to answer or engage or comment on, by all means, send me a super chat question and I will write it down. I write down the super chats that come in during the first half of the show. And then after the first half of the show is over, I do a roll call. And during that roll call, we find out who is watching. And it's always a very diverse crowd from different countries, different nationalities, different corners of the United States, different parts of the world. It's always really, really awesome. So we do the roll call. And then after we do the roll call, then I answer super chat questions for the rest of the night. So if there's something you would like me to comment on in the second half of the show, shoot me a super chat. As long as the super chats keep rolling in, I keep answering questions. Rarely do I have to cut it off. So if you have something you want me to talk about in the second half of the show, send me a super chat. It is your super chats that really make the second half of the show gold. It's often when people ask me a good question and I give an off-the-cuff answer. That's how we have lively exchanges. So if there's something you want me to answer, by all means, send a super chat. I'll put it on the list. And then the second half of the show, I answer the super chats. Very good, folks. So now I am going to jump into my opening remarks. But before I do that, make sure that you hit the subscribe button. The YouTube algorithm, unfortunately, does sometimes unsubscribe people against their wishes. So make sure you've hit the subscribe button. On top of that, to make sure you find out whenever we do these streams, make sure you hit the notifications bell. Make sure that you hit the notifications bell. And, we always like it when you give us a like. So if you want to hit the like button, you can do that as well. Please like, please subscribe, and please hit the notifications bell. We appreciate it. If you want to be a member of the Center for Political Innovation, you can sign up on the website. If you want to be a member of the Patreon and get special access, by all means, sign up for the Patreon. And we got our first super chat question. What do you think communists should be doing to congeal interests between us, MAGA, and liberals? And liberals. Very good. And I'm writing that down. And that will be the first question that I answer in the second half of the show. That's how it works. So thank you, Maxwell, for your super chat question. And now I will begin my opening remarks. Folks, there is one political point that I have made that continually comes up and continually becomes a point of division between myself and other leftists. And it is a point that I am very adamant about my position on. My position lines up with the position of Mao, with the position of Lenin, with the position of Marx, it is the sensible position that I take. However, every time I state this position, American online leftists lose their minds. And this was the position of the Communist Party of the United States, was their position in the better days, and it's even still their position now. This is the position of every sensible communist party in the world. It always has been. And it's not really controversial if you think about it. There's nothing remotely controversial about it. It's just kind of common sense politics. Kind of common sense politics. But yet, if you say it on the communist internet, all the 14-year-olds lose their minds. It drives them up the wall. How dare you say that? And I will state this position, which is just common sense. And I'd be happy to debate anybody on this position. I've debated people about this before. It is just common sense. And the position that I take, which is the position of Mao, which is the position of Lenin, which is the position of the Communist Party USA, which is the position of all sensible communists in the world, is that we do not advocate a violent revolution. We do not advocate a violent revolution. It's a pretty sensible position. Generally, sensible political forces do not advocate violence. People don't go around saying violence is a good thing. I want more violence. I want more killing, more death. Generally, if you want to be taken seriously in a country and you are a major political party, you don't say, I want my country to be consumed by civil war. I want neighborhoods in my community to be turned into battlefields. I want people to flee their homes. I want there to be war refugees running to the borders of my country. Generally, people don't say such things. And they don't mean them either. If you really want what is best for the American working class, you don't want them to be having their communities destroyed by war. You don't want them to be dying. You don't want them to endure some kind of catastrophic event where explosions and bombs and rival armies are battling it out. You don't want such a thing. And if you claim to be an advocate for the working class, you must not advocate a violent revolution. It's pretty sensible politics. Pretty sensible position. Pretty basic. Pretty basic. And if you look at the various revolutions that have happened throughout history, they've lined up with this. The Chinese communists did not take up guns until they were forcibly removed and facing extermination at the hands of Chiang Kai-shek. During the early 1920s, they were part of a coalition government, and they worked peacefully within the KMT, Kuomintang government, to build up their forces and to advocate a peaceful transition to socialism. And then, after Chiang Kai-shek started killing them, they went to the countryside and they joined the peasant uprisings. And then they once again formed a coalition government to fight against Japan. After Japan was defeated, they once again tried to have a coalition government. Many times, Mao said, we do not advocate civil war. We would prefer a coalition government. If you read Long Live Leninism, they said that a transition to socialism that's peaceful is preferable. None of this is at all controversial. Communist parties that are serious. You go to Russia, they have a huge communist party, and that communist party does not advocate a violent revolution. You go to India, they have many huge communist parties. Communist Party of India Marxist, Communist Party of India, Communist Party or the Socialist Unity Center of India. They do not advocate a violent revolution. You go to Latin America, go to Venezuela, go to Chile. I mean, you go to Peru. I mean, communists generally do not advocate violent revolutions. They just don't. Violent revolutions do happen. That's true. But they happen when the capitalists make a peaceful revolution impossible. When the capitalists prevent people from peacefully organizing, when people are facing violent, heavy-handed state repression, their ability to peacefully organize is suppressed. That is the situation in which violent revolutions occur. But revolutionaries always try to avoid that. And they try to work to get socialists and communists elected to office, to build up labor unions, to build up community organizations. Communists always try to carry out a peaceful transition to socialism. However, they do understand that the capitalist state is a body of armed men, and that often, in order to stay in power, the capitalists will abolish democratic rights and engage in heavy-handed violence. And under such circumstances, the workers have the right to defend themselves. And when violent revolutions do occur, it is the working class defending itself. And communists also will educate people about the fact that this is likely to occur. And they will explain the need for community militias and, armed groups among the population to practice self-defense. They'll oppose gun control legislation because gun control legislation is a mechanism through which the people are prevented from defending themselves in such a circumstance. But at the same time, they do not advocate armed violent revolution. They prefer and put forward a program for a peaceful transition to socialism. This is very, very much common sense. And the reactions that I get every time I make this point, that we advocate a peaceful transition to socialism, the reactions that I get are very, very strange. Very strange. The reactions that I get generally involve people saying, "How dare you, Caleb? You don't recognize the right of people to defend themselves." Yes, I do. I do. They say, "Oh my God, Caleb, you're telling oppressed people they don't have the right to engage in armed self-defense." No, I don't. "Oh my God, Caleb, you're a revisionist. You think that we can just, peacefully get socialism through voting." No, I don't. When people say to me, "Caleb, do you think socialism can be achieved through elections?" I always say no. Socialism, the transformation of society from a capitalist society to a socialist society, a situation where the means of production, the centers of economic power, go from being privately owned and operated in the interests of a few capitalists to being public property and serving the people. Huge, dramatic change in how the economy operates. The idea that could be changed on simply the basis of people voting, that all it would take to change such a thing is a bunch of people going and punching a ballot. That's ridiculous. Nowhere has socialism ever been achieved simply as the result of people going out and voting. And the idea that you could have socialism simply because people go out and vote, and that makes socialism, and then the votes come in and they say, "All right, well, socialism won." Never. Wherever socialism has been achieved, it has been the result of a huge building up of popular power, community assemblies, mobilizations of the public, sections of the military, sections of the policing agencies, big institutions in society embracing socialism and promoting socialism. Socialism always accompanies an awakening of the population, with the people getting heavily involved in politics, being educated about ideology, engaging in politics on their own behalf. Socialism, for a country to transition to socialism, requires a huge amount of dramatic changes, the building of a mass movement. That is what it requires. That is what it requires. And the idea that such a thing is not necessary, and all that's necessary is for people to go check their, one box in an election, that's ridiculous. The position that I take is very sensible. It's very rational. The idea is that we should build up a mass movement based on a program to change society, to move society towards socialism, and to do so peacefully, but to challenge property relations, to put forward the need for the means of production to be operated to serve the people, to put forward a rational vision for changing society, and build a mass movement around such a program. That is the basis of building a working class revolutionary movement. And I always want to ask these people who advocate a violent revolution, I always just want to say to them, so what's the plan? How are you going to do this violent revolution? Right? You're saying, no, we can't advocate a peaceful road to socialism. We must advocate a violent revolution. So what is the violent revolution? How do we have the violent revolution? How do we have it? And why do we need this violent revolution? Why can't we, move towards socialism peacefully? And they'll say, well, we can't move towards socialism peacefully because, the ruling class, they have the media. The media is all in their favor, and people are lined up and people get brainwashed by the media and all of that. I say, okay, so if you're saying that the reason we can't have socialism is because people are too brainwashed to go out and vote for socialism. If we can't get enough people to go out and vote for socialism, how do you think we're going to go get enough people to go out and die for socialism? If you're saying it's too difficult, we can't win an election because it's too difficult to get people to go out and punch their ballots for socialism, how in the world do you tell me that you're going to get enough people to go out and die for socialism that you can successfully, violently overthrow the capitalist state? I mean, if we can't even, if voting for socialism is off the table because the bourgeoisie controls the media, etc., how is it that you think violent revolution is somehow on the agenda? Okay. I mean, always ask any of these people that insist we must have a violent revolution. What is the plan for the violent revolution? How is it going to happen? How does this violent revolution that you advocate happen? Now, just ask that question and see what they say. Very few of them will give you an answer that is in any way coherent or logical. Some of them will basically say, oh, well, things have to just get so bad and deteriorate that people, they get so angry that things are bad. Wait a second. What guarantee is there that if things are bad, people are going to become socialists and communists? In the 1970s, the U.S. economy had its first major downturn since the end of the Second World War, and that led to the Reagan Revolution. Ronald Reagan came in there. It led the United States to become much more right-wing. In Germany in the 1930s, things were very, very bad, and there were definitely big socialist and communist groups. But ultimately, what came out of that was Nazism and the fascist state. So, you say, well, things have to just get really, really bad. Okay, things have to get really, really bad. But what else? There obviously has to be more to it than that. All right, things have to get really, really bad. And what? And, you just sit around and wait for things to get bad so we can have a violent revolution? Like, what? That doesn't make any sense. We just sit around and wait for things to get bad. That's not a logical position. That's not a plan. I'm not interested in sitting back and waiting for things to get worse. Sometimes they'll put forward strange, very, very, very strange, complicated theories, right? They'll put forward the idea that, well, there's there'll be things like huge rebellions among the black community, right? The black people, there'll be events like the LA riots. There'll be events like, like the stuff that happened in 2020, the Black Lives Matter uprising. There'll be these explosions of urban rioting among black people, and the communists will be at the center of these urban rebellions. And amid the rebellion, they'll declare themselves the new government. I think the Revolutionary Communist Party, the Bobavakian people, they published a book called Could We Really Win? And that's basically what it said, that something like the LA riots would happen and they would be at the center of it. That amid something like that, they would be at the center of these black urban rebellions and they would declare a new government. Here's the problem with that. Most black people in America are not sympathetic to communism. And even during the LA riots, most of the black people in Los Angeles that were rioting were not taking leadership from communists. And in fact, the Revolutionary Communist Party, the group that put this out, is a mostly white organization. So what makes you think that hypothetically speaking, if there was something like the LA riots that happened in a bunch of cities all at once, that amid that, a group of white college professors would be able to declare themselves to be the new government, and that this uprising would somehow support them? How does that happen? And then on top of that, you seem to have forgotten that, look at a map. The USA is a very big country. And if LA were in the middle of some kind of black rebellion, if New York City were in the middle of some kind of black rebellion, if Chicago and Minneapolis were in the middle of some kind of black rebellion, what about the rest of the country? What about all the folks there who have guns, who would not be part of such a rebellion that was only among urban black people? How would they react to such an event? What about the military? How would it react? A lot of black people in the military, but what makes you think the black people in the military are going to recognize you and your organization as the new government? What about the FBI? What about the CIA? I mean, it's not a serious plan. It's not a serious plan. It's silly. It's pretty silly. I mean, I hear other things like that. And then for the most part, these people who have this violent revolution fetish, these Maoists, usually it's Maoists who have this fetish. They like Mao because he had a gun, because in the Little Red Book, he said political power grows out of the barrel of a gun. They like Mao because they see Mao as a symbol of violence. They like the Shining Path in Peru because they see them as violent. These guys really love violence, not so much economics or scientific Marxism, etc., but they love violence. They love violence. And so you say to them, what's the plan? And then they say, oh, there can't be a revolution in the United States because the people here are all Euro settlers. The people here are all the labor aristocracy. The people here have it too good, so they're not revolutionary. And if I hear that, I say, then why do I care what you think? If you don't think a revolution is possible in the United States, if your orientation is that the people here have it too good, and there's no hope for revolution, why should I listen to you and how to move towards socialism? Why should I listen to you? You don't even think what I want to do is possible. I mean, I'm trying to think of an example, but should a butcher get advice on how to be a butcher from a vegetarian? A vegetarian doesn't believe in eating meat. So why would a butcher go to a vegetarian and say, now, how should I cut the meat? The vegetarian says, I don't believe in meat. So it's not a rational discussion. So when people like Jason and others attack me for saying I want a peaceful transition to socialism, and I want to put forward a program for a peaceful transition to socialism, and that's this unforgivable crime, why do I care what they think? They don't think socialism is possible in the United States. They say, no, the West, they're all Euro settlers, they're all no good. So you think that, why do you care? I mean, I could advocate a violent road to socialism. I could advocate any road to socialism. You shouldn't care at all. Shouldn't matter to you because you say it's not possible. You say it's not possible. the more that you dig in to people advocating violent revolution, not people saying that it might happen, right? That the capitalists might force such a situation in the course of struggle. They might make a peaceful transition impossible. That's a very sensible thing to say. That's what Lenin says in his book, The State and Revolution. But for the people that go around saying that you must advocate a violent revolution, and somehow because I and other sensible revolutionaries do not advocate a violent revolution, we do not go around saying we want violence, we don't go around saying we want civil war, we instead put forward a program of concrete things that could actually challenge property relations and make life better in the United States. Because I do such a thing, you know, they condemn it as revisionist. The more you talk to those kinds of people, those kind of people who insist that we talk about the need for a violent revolution, that if you don't advocate a violent revolution, that you are somehow committing some horrific offense, the more that you dig into those folks, the more you realize these people, they're not serious. They're not serious. For them, violent revolution is a fantasy. It's an action movie that they imagine someday participating in. It's a LARP. It's a way to feel good about themselves. And that's all it is. That's really all it is for those people. They say they advocate a violent revolution because it serves some kind of psychological purpose for them. Makes them feel like they're ultra revolutionary. It does something for their self-esteem, right? It makes them feel like they can wake up in the mirror and look at themselves and say, I am so much more revolutionary than people who advocate a peaceful road to socialism. I advocate a violent road to socialism. It's weird. It's strange. It serves some other purpose because they're not moving toward some kind of violent road to socialism. They haven't coherently thought about how some kind of violent road to socialism is possible. It's just some kind of weird fantasy that they have taken on. It's some kind of weird expression of their antisocial desires. You know, it's interesting. Nowadays, you know, we're a lot more careful with this kind of thing. You know, we can't talk this way. You know, there's been so many horrendous school shootings and stuff. But years ago, before school shootings were so common, there was a cartoon from Calvin and Hobbes, right? I think it was Calvin and Hobbes, right? It was a cartoon. Nowadays, you couldn't make a cartoon like this because it would be too offensive. But it was Calvin and Hobbes, and I think one of the characters, either Calvin or Hobbes, is like a little boy. He's a little boy, and it shows this little boy sitting in his school, and he's like working on papers or something like that. And then it has like a bubble, you know, about like what he's fantasizing about in his mind. And he's not happy. This little boy is like unhappy working on his school papers, bored, something like that. And then it cuts away to the fantasy he has in his mind, which is his school blowing up. Now, you can't do a cartoon like that anymore because, you know, nowadays with school shootings and stuff, you know, that's not cool. But it's true that young men in particular, but even young women to some degree or other, do often have a level of alienation from the society they live in, have anger at authority figures, have anger at their peers, don't like having to go to school, and that manifests itself in kind of a fantasy of the world around them being destroyed, right? And it's quite normal, that you might have a young child who hates going to school, and of course they're not serious about it, and they're not imagining anyone being hurt or anything, but they have this image of their school just exploding, or their hometown turning into a place where there's a civil war or some kind of confrontation. Why? Because they've never been through something like that. They're a child. They don't know what it's like. They don't know what it's really like. They're expressing their resentment. They're expressing their frustration. That's all it is. 1 second. That's all it is. That's really all it is. That's really all it is. Sorry, I had to take care of something work related there. That's really all it is. It's just like a fantasy. It's, they don't like the way things are. They've got some pent up frustration. And so they have this kind of hypothetical dream in their head of the world around them exploding, right? And they don't have any intention of actually being violent to anybody. It's just like a childish fantasy. I think I believe years ago, the author of the book The Basketball Diaries, he had a problem because the Basketball Diaries is a novel that was popular during the punk era, I think in the 80s, right? It's about a teenage boy who becomes a heroin addict, right? He's a basketball star and he starts using heroin. That's what it's about. And there is a passage in the book where the boy fantasizes about being violent at his school or something like that. And then this was written in the 80s when school shootings were much less common. They didn't happen very much. And then as the Columbine stuff happened and all of that, people were quite disturbed by this passage in the book. And the author came forward and he said, well, there are many young men who have alienation from society, who have violent fantasies in their minds, but they never want to do anything, right? They never want to do anything about it. They just, and this is common. And when he's writing a novel about a high school student, who becomes a drug addict, he thought it was appropriate because that's a thing that happens. That's true, right? There are a lot of young men. There are a lot of children even that feel a level of alienation. They don't want to be at school. They don't like their teachers. They don't like their parents. They don't like society. And they have some kind of violent fantasy in their head. But it's not real. It's not realistic. It's just this vague desire to, they're mad. They want to tear things down, but it's not real. It's not real. And the people who do commit real horrendous school shootings, it's very different, right? The signs that somebody might be something like that is a completely different thing. And you can read all on the internet about the kind of people that go and commit those kind of sociopathic acts of horrendous mass murder. People who actually do such crimes, it's not some vague fantasy in their head. It's not the Hobbes cartoon of Hobbes sitting there mad in school, and then he has this fantasy of the school exploding, right? It's not. But when I see these people on the internet that are just so fired up, how dare you not advocate a violent revolution, Caleb? How dare you put forward a program for a peaceful transition to socialism? And it just triggers them so much. How dare you? How dare you? It's just like the biggest possible insult to them to advocate a peaceful transition to socialism. It's like a crime. Like, how dare you? I have to think on some level that I'm robbing them of their revenge fantasy. I'm robbing them of a fantasy they have in their mind that will never come true, that they have no plan for making come true, that gives them some kind of cathartic release when they're angry. That they have some fantasy that there's going to be this violent revolution. There's actually a TV program from the 70s called Citizen Smith. It's a TV program from the 1970s. It was on the BBC, on British television. And it was about a character named Wolfie Smith, who's a communist. And it was this teenage boy who's a communist, young, I'd say 20s boy, this young man who is a communist. And it's kind of a joke, like he's a caricature of a young communist. And there's some pretty funny interactions in it. It's just like a situation comedy, but leftism, socialist politics was so common in Britain in the 1970s that it drifted into popular culture. And so you have this, he's this young man who wears a Che Guevara beret, and he has his political party, which is called the Popular Front of Tooting. He lives in Tooting, which is like a neighborhood near London or something. And so his organization is the Popular Front of Tooting. And I think the first episode, they show like an election, and they have like the Labor candidate, this many votes, hooray. The Conservative Party, this many votes, hooray. And the Popular Front of Tooting, 3. And so then the next scene is him sitting with his 4 comrades, trying to figure out which one didn't vote for him. He's like, I only got 3 votes. One of you guys didn't vote for me. It's very funny. It's a lot of scenes like that. But this young man in the show Citizen Smith, he's like a caricature of your like young man who is into communist radical politics back in the 1970s. There's one particular running gag they have on the show, which is that he carries around in his front pocket. He has a front pocket on his shirt, the list of people he's going to execute when the revolution comes. Right. And when he gets mad at somebody, he pulls the list out, and he pulls his pen out, and he's like, I'm putting you on the list. I'm putting you on the list. And his friends will like grab him and be like, no, don't do it. And they'll be like trying to hold him back. He's like, I'm writing his name down. I'm writing his name down. It's silly. It's funny. Because we all know that to some degree or other, some of these people that get caught up in communist politics, there's a very big element of that. It's not serious. It is an expression of their adolescent alienation. There's some other funny exchanges I remember from watching that show. I remember there's there's an argument, like his girlfriend wants to hang out with him. His girlfriend wants to hang out with him one night. And he's like, I can't do that. We've got a secret meeting of the party tonight. A secret meeting. And she's like, what are you going to discuss? And he's like, okay, I'll tell you. Tonight, we're going to take a vote on whether or not to officially support the Basque separatist movement in Spain. And she says, Wolfie, what does it matter if you officially support the Basque separatist movement in Spain? And he says, well, remember when I officially supported the Vietnamese? And we officially supported the Vietnamese, and we wrote a statement officially supporting the Vietnamese. What happened next? They won. And she says, but Wolfie, you didn't even pay full postage on the letter you sent to the Vietnamese telling them that you offered full support. They had to pay 10 cents out of their own pockets just to open the letter. It's really silly. It's really, and it gets to the point of that a lot of leftist politics in the first world is very, very, very silly. It's very, 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 very silly. There's a cartoon. I think there's a blog, that I don't endorse. A lot of the cartoons I wouldn't totally agree with. There's a blog, Great Moments in Leftism. Great Moments in Leftism. And they have a great cartoon. And it shows like some guerrilla fighters like in the mountains in fatigues or something. And one of them runs up and he says, Capitan, I have some amazing news. And he says, "What is it, comrade?" He says, "A small Trotskyite organization in New York City has just issued a short statement offering critical support to our campaign." You know, I mean, that's on the level of a lot of what passes for leftist politics in the United States. And the whole point of the Center for Political Innovation, and I think the reason that I'm so widely hated, and thank you, Wesley, the reason that I'm so widely hated by these people is because I have tried my hardest, my absolute hardest, to get out of this kind of silliness. The Center for Political Innovation is not named the ultra-revolutionary party of the United States. It's not named the Communist Workers' Refoundation Socialist Party. It's not even a party. It's just an educational think tank. It's a socialist education project. Because a socialist education project is realistic. None of the organizations in the United States that call themselves communist parties are actually communist parties. They are all groups of people who believe in communist ideology to some degree or other and engage in some kind of activism, but they are not revolutionary parties. The Center for Political Innovation, unlike these groups, recognizes that it is not a political party. The Communist Party USA is not a political party. The Workers' World Party, the PSL, the Socialist Workers' Party, none of these are real parties. These are groups of people who get together and study Marxism and engage in some kind of activism. But a political party, a real political party, would represent real political forces in the country. A real political party would have labor unions aligned with it. A real political party would have neighborhoods and communities that supported it. A real political party would be able to put forward real demands. A real political party would be something that the government, political parties would be concerned about. When the Democrats put out something, the Republicans look into it and read it. When the Republicans put out something, the Democrats look into it and read it. Do you think that the Democrats or the Republicans give a flying fuck what the Communist Party of the United States does? Well, if you think they do, you are delusional. They could care less. The Democrats and the Republicans don't even have any idea the Communist Party still exists, right? A real political party looks absolutely nothing like any of these communist parties in the United States. And so for the Center for Political Innovation to call ourselves a party, that would be our first mistake. And for us to try and take on the aspects of a party, democratic centralism, a central committee, a group of people passing resolutions, you are expelled from the central committee of the party. It would be silliness. It would just be utter silliness because it's meaningless. It's completely meaningless. The Center for Political Innovation is an educational project intended to teach people about Marxism and anti-imperialism and socialism and raise the awareness in the population and attach itself to real political forces like real countries around the world, like Russia and China and Venezuela and Iran and Cuba, countries that are resisting Western capitalism. The Center for Political Innovation is a force that seeks to advocate policies like rebuilding the country's infrastructure, like public ownership of oil and natural gas, like public control of banking, like an economic bill of rights. The Center for Political Innovation hopes to put itself in a position where real political forces might read what it says. Wouldn't it be great if Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard was reading all the books published by the Center for Political Innovation? Wouldn't it be great if there were members of Congress and elected officials who were, the Center for Political Innovation just came out with some new material and they were reading it and basing their policies on it? Wouldn't it be great if the kind of politics espoused by the Center for Political Innovation were guiding real community organizations, real labor unions, real bloc associations, there were real candidates running for office on platforms and policies influenced by the educational work that the Center for Political Innovation was doing. All of that would be good. That would be great. I hope someday that happens, and that is a real serious aspiration. And sure, if such a thing were to happen, if we had a big chunk of the government that was wanting peace with Russia and peace with China, and peace with Venezuela, peace with Iran, they wanted to put oil and natural gas under public ownership, wanted to nationalize banking, wanted an economic bill of rights. And if a big chunk of the government believed that, and there were whole neighborhoods and communities, whole states that might support a candidate who advocated such a thing in an election, under such circumstances, it's very likely that the rulers, the big oil monopolists, the bankers, would move to crush that movement and would try to establish some kind of authoritarian military state, would try to outlaw advocating socialism, would call it disinformation. Anyone caught with a CPI pamphlet was put in prison. You can imagine such a situation. But you can also imagine that under such a situation, there might be people in the military and people in the Pentagon who say, well, no, I like this message. I like what this mass movement of the people advocating peace and advocating jobs and education for the population have to say. So we're not going to go along with that. And you can also imagine a situation where there might be people in the military or in the government apparatus that might say, okay, well, while we don't agree with this, we certainly don't support this faction that wants to create a fascist state to crush the movement of the people. And under such circumstances, if some, fascist entity were trying to crush democracy and the democratic rights of the people were being crushed in response to some kind of mass upsurge of democratic participation, you can imagine a situation where people in communities and neighborhoods would come together and say, how can we defend ourselves? When sections of the military would say, you know what? We are going to defend the Constitution. Our oath says to defend the Constitution. And if they're going to try to crush democracy in order to save capitalism, we're going to defend the Constitution. We're going to move against that. You can imagine some kind of violent revolution breaking out under such circumstances. This is realistic, what I'm talking about here. Very far off in the future. But if that violent revolution were to happen, it wouldn't be because communists went around advocating a violent revolution. It would be because communists went around advocating a peaceful revolution, a peaceful transition to socialism. And the powers that be were so determined to prevent that from happening that they moved to attack and violently suppress the people. And under such circumstances, the people stood up and did what is very, very, very American and said, no, we are going to defend our democracy. We're going to defend our democratic rights. And they would do what Abraham Lincoln did and defend the republic from those who took up arms against it. They would do what Roosevelt did in response to the business plot and defend the Constitution and defend the country from those who seek to overturn democracy and prevent the people and their democratic will from being carried out. And yes, such a circumstance might look like a violent revolution when it happens, but that would only be because the capitalists forced such a situation. And it could only ever occur if there was a huge, well-organized mass movement of the people advocating a peaceful transition to socialism. And if the communists remain an isolated group of teenagers who don't go out and put forward a real program to make the country better, who don't wave American flags and say they love the country and that they have a program to make the country better, if they don't explain that the same banks and corporations that are destroying countries around the world, grinding Africa into poverty, pushing us into a new world war, those same banks and corporations are destroying Iowa and Tennessee and Minnesota and Alabama and Missouri and Kansas. if they don't get the American people in their millions to understand that the bankers and the Wall Street monopolists are the true enemies of America, and that the future of the American working people is bound up with the struggle of the people around the world for national liberation against the big banks and oil monopolies and the international oligarchy. If such a broad mass anti-imperialist movement never comes into existence, there's absolutely no chance of moving towards socialism at all. And such a circumstance is never in any danger of happening. So when you hear somebody go around advocating violent revolution, what they're really saying is, I'm not serious. I haven't really thought this out. I'm expressing my alienation. I'm expressing my resentment. I'm expressing my feeling that society isn't going the way I want. That's what you're seeing. You're not seeing a serious political force. You're not seeing someone who really is able to comprehend how the laws of history work. That doesn't mean you shouldn't talk to that person. That doesn't mean you shouldn't engage with that person. It doesn't mean you shouldn't try to educate that person. I recently talked about kindergarten communism, the need to get past kindergarten communism. You know, when you're first getting into kindergarten communism, some confusion about this point might occur. I mean, that it makes sense that people, when they're first getting into this, they might have some romantic feelings about China or Russia or Cuba or something, and they might not get it. So there's no reason to not engage with these people. There's no reason to not try and talk to them. But when we talk to them, we should be constantly trying to get them to a higher plane of understanding. No force is ever going to be taken seriously politically if it's isolated from the population, if it advocates making conditions in the country worse, if it advocates the country deteriorating into some form of civil war, if its message is not one that's going to improve the lives of the people in the country, no force is going to be taken seriously. No force that advocates destroying the country, that says the people of the country are no good, that doesn't offer a program that would improve the lives of the people, that doesn't effectively go to the people and mobilize them around that program. Any force that does that is not going to be taken seriously and is never going to become a real serious political force in the country. And that is just a reality. Any force that says fuck America is never going to have any chance of leading America. Ever. Now, for oppressed nationalities, this is different. Black nationalists do not aspire to lead America. They aspire to lead black people. And yes, I can see a situation where among the black people, the majority embrace black nationalism. I can see that. And for a black nationalist to burn the American flag, for a black nationalist to say fuck America, that makes perfect sense. All right? And for black nationalists whose message is we black people are not Americans. We want to be separate. We want to form a separate, black belt republic or certain black regions that are separate. For black nationalists to put forward an agenda that is blatantly hostile to the concept of America makes perfect sense. Makes perfect sense. And we respect the right of black people to determine the question of integration or separation for themselves. Martin Luther King Jr., he waved the American flag. He considered himself an American. He said what he wanted was the right of black people to have equal access to American society. Malcolm X, on the other hand, he said, we are not Americans. We have never been Americans, and we want to be separate. We want to have our own territory within the U.S. borders. We want control of our own neighborhoods, etc. Well, we respect the right of the black people of America to pick between Malcolm X or Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. or any other force that may come along, and we do not seek to impose that. So for an oppressed group, for an oppressed nationality, it's different, of course. But for a force that actually aspires to be a serious political current, for a force that does aspire to lead America, the message can never be fuck America. And I want to let you all in on a dirty secret, a dirty little secret, which it took me a very hard time and a very long time to recognize, which is this. If a political organization does not serve some kind of function, it doesn't exist. Yes, there's all kinds of people all over the internet who are not serving any political function. They're tweeting, they're giving their opinions. But if a political organization, a party, a labor union, a think tank, if they don't serve some kind of function for somebody, they don't exist. And often, the stated purpose is different than the function that they actually serve. Let's be real. The Communist Party USA, on paper, is supposed to be a group that's leading the United States toward Bill of Rights socialism. Right? If you read their program and constitution, the Communist Party USA, in theory, is supposed to be a mechanism for people moving the United States towards socialism. However, if you get close to the Communist Party USA, you will notice that while their stated purpose is one thing, they serve another purpose. The purpose of the Communist Party USA is twofold. One, it is to get people who are attracted to Marxist and socialist ideas to vote for the Democrats. They work really, really hard. They for years, they are very good at going around to people that are sympathetic to Cuba, people that are sympathetic to China or anti-imperialist countries, going around to people that are getting into Marxism and convincing them that to stop fascism, they need to vote for the Democrats, and getting them to become Democratic Party organizers. And often the Communist Party USA has supplied some of the best organizers for the Democratic Party. Some of the most hardworking people that campaigned for Walter Mondale, in local areas, New York City, the Reform Democratic clubs of New York City, some of the people that worked the hardest for the Democratic Party were communists. So that's the first purpose the Communist Party serves. Second purpose that the Communist Party serves is they function as a back channel from the Democratic Party to socialist countries. All right? The Communist Party exists to tell China and tell Vietnam and tell Cuba, it'll be better for you if the Democrats get into office. It's a group that campaigns for the Democrats, and then it sends delegates to China or to Vietnam or to Cuba to tell them all about the good connections that they have in the Democratic Party, to reassure them that the Democrats are not crazy fascists like the Republicans, and to kind of hint to the socialist countries, if not directly tell them, that they should be putting their resources and their efforts into supporting the Democratic Party of the United States, because the Republicans will make it so much worse, and the Communist Party has, they've got a few people inside the Democratic Party, so there's hope for that. That's the purpose that the Communist Party serves. It is a vehicle of the Democratic Party and the American intelligence community for courting and feeding disinformation and manipulating the socialist states on the one hand, and on the other hand, of corralling leftists and socialists and young people that are becoming anti-imperialist and revolutionary, corralling them to vote for the Democrats. And that is why the Communist Party exists. It serves a function. It is necessary to do this, right? When you have big countries led by communist parties, it's going to be necessary to have a communist party in the United States that can manage the relationship between the Communist Party of that country and the Democratic Party of the United States. So there's that. And that's the Communist Party. The Workers' World Party and the PSL, what purpose do they serve? They stage liberal rallies. They stage protests. Right? They stage the protests, and they try to push the protests in a more radical direction. Right? That's the purpose that they serve. They have protests around trendy liberal causes, and they try to insert some kind of radical message into those protests. They try to, insert their tanky politics, their pro-Iran and pro-Cuba, pro-North Korea politics into these trendy liberal protests. And they get the permit and they stage a Black Lives Matter rally. They stage an anti-Trump rally, and then they try to nudge the people at this anti-Trump rally to have revolutionary anti-imperialist politics. That's the purpose that they serve. And they need somebody. They need somebody to stage these rallies, And they need to make clear to the world that not all America, there is room in America for dissident views, that, so it serves a purpose. It serves a function. But is that function to transition the United States towards socialism? Is that function to move the United States into the anti-imperialist camp? Of course not. It's another function. And one of the most clear signs that a political organization is not serving its stated function, is not serving the function of becoming a mass political organization that's leading the broad mass of the people. One of the clear signs of that is when they go out of their way to alienate people, which they do. And if you notice, all of these little communist sects go out of their way to alienate people. They alienate anyone who's patriotic to the United States. They alienate anyone who is religious and of Christian faith. They alienate people on the basis of all kinds of things, because they're not looking to become a mass organization that includes millions of people. That's not what they're doing. They're looking to cultivate a small group of people to carry out a specific function. And so if you are not the kind of person who's going to help them carry out their function, they have no problem alienating you. And these groups go out of their way, and I saw it over and over again. They go out of their way to alienate huge chunks of the population. They go out of their way to alienate people because the people they're alienating are not useful in carrying out their stated function. Do you think the Communist Party has any hope of ever gaining a foothold in red states? Of course not. Do you think that, red state workers are, en masse going to join the Communist Party? No, of course not. But they don't want that. Their job is to channel people in blue states to become Democratic Party volunteers to create, I went over what their purpose is. The Answer Coalition, PSL, Workers' World. Do you think they're ever going to, are they ever going to recruit among the broad masses of Americans? No, because that's not their function. Their function is to stage manage the protest movement. That's what their function is. And so because of that, why do they need to win over? They can go out of their way to alienate those folks. They can go out of their way to offend those folks because they don't need to win them over in order to carry out their function. Well, we at the Center for Political Innovation, we know what our function is. We are honest about our function. We are not pretending to be the vanguard party. We aren't. We are not pretending that we are going to someday be the leaders of the tribune of the people and storm the Winter Palace. We are not saying that. We're not saying that we are a political party that's going to win all the elections. No, we're not saying that. We are very honest about what our function is, which is to carry out educational events and educate people about socialism, educate people about anti-imperialism, and communicate an anti-imperialist message to the broad masses of people. On the one hand, we want to put forward a program to move the United States in an anti-imperialist direction and in a socialistic direction that would be agreeable to most people in a popular way. And number two, we want to create a community of people who want to understand revolutionary ideology and who want to understand Marxism and class struggle and anti-imperialism and the history of our movement. So on the one hand, we want to disseminate among the broad masses of people a sensible, coherent program and message about how things could change and the country could improve by moving away from imperialism, moving away from capitalism, moving toward an economy that serves the people, and breaking out of this open international system. That's the first thing, is an approach to the broad masses of people with a clear 4-point plan of these are ways your life could be better. Why doesn't the government do these 4 things? These things seem like common sense, pretty basic. That is our approach to the broad masses. That is our mass line. And for the kind of people who watch these streams every night, for the kind of people who have bookshelves like these, for the kind of people who are interested in this kind of stuff, we want to build a core of people who know each other and trust each other and can depend on each other and have great events with each other and support each other and function as a community. And function as a community of people who offer each other support and who are a community of solidarity rooted in the history of our movement. And in this community, we want everyone to be very educated, and we want to have classes and meetings and forums. We want to sing the socialist songs. We want to study the classic works of Marxism. We want to study Islamic socialism and Christian socialism. We want to study Bolivarianism and Ba'athist Arab socialism, the Juche ideology of People's Korea. We want to build a community where people rely on each other, people support each other, people know each other, and the foundation is continuity of the revolutionary movement that has gone on for so long, right? That is the idea. That is the twofold purpose of the Center for Political Innovation. That is our stated purpose, to put forward a clear, coherent program for the broad masses of people that is patriotic, that is anti-imperialist, that is not hostile. It seems rational and sensible. And secondly, to build a community of people who want to give their lives to this, people who want this to be what they live for, people who want to make this what their life is about. That is the purpose of the Center for Political Innovation, and we're completely open about it. We may not be always so good at doing these things. Things may go wrong sometimes. We may have trouble having a conference. There may be disagreements in the organization. This may go wrong. That may go wrong. But we are open about what our stated purpose is. We don't call ourselves a party. We don't pretend that we are on the brink of taking power. We don't have highfalutin delusions of grandeur. We recognize that we are a small group of people engaged in educational work. But part of what makes us so important is the fact that we do have international connections. We have sent delegations to Nicaragua. We do have people who pay close attention to our work in Russia and in China and in Iran and in Venezuela. There are people from all over the world watching this stream right now because they think people doing this kind of work in the center of U.S. imperialism is very important. And out of the movement to the masses is my attempt to form an organization that is honest about its function, honest about its purpose, and has a realistic sense of its own capabilities and can take on a task that needs to be done and move us toward the world that we need as our country slips further into crisis. And those are my remarks, my opening remarks for tonight. And I hope you found them helpful and insightful. So please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. Now, after the roll call, I am supposed to answer super chat questions, but I don't have very many of them. So if people have more things they want me to talk about, please, by all means, send some super chats, because if not, it's going to be a short second half of the show. There's 2 names on here. I don't know who they are. I'm going to Google them on air, so it's not just a complete waste of time. I just say I don't know. But there are 2 names people send in. I don't even know who they are. So send in some super chats so that we have a good second half of the show. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. And now we will do our roll call. Names and locations, names and locations. Who is with us here tonight? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who's with us here tonight? Who's with us? Jose says it's neat. Jenny agrees. Very good. Very good. We got Lawrence in Chicago. We got Karen in Germany. Very, very good. We got Sam Price in West Virginia. We got someone in Croatia. Deliverance Boy. Auckland, New Zealand. Lori in Oklahoma. Jared from Virginia. Max Wells in Tennessee. Anthony in Fort Texas. Parasocialite in Maryland. Io in New York City. Tyler in Missouri. Jose Gonzalez in Venezuela, Caracas. We got Stephen Ann in Georgia, Liam in Auckland. We got Deb in Mexico, Tyler in Missouri, Liam in Auckland, New Zealand, Simon from Missouri, Kieran from San Diego, Ryan in Oakland, Patch in Arizona, Klaus in love with his couch, Jenny Lynn in Cincinnati, Mohsin from Iran, Bob Troy in New York, Enoch from Australia, Olympia Logic, Mindanao to Midwest, Sweden, Neil Fraser in ZF, James Fouquet in Thailand, Balthazar in Oakland, Edward Allen in Kentucky, Carlos in Texas, Split in Croatia, Ottawa, Canada, work in progress, Cleveland Pirate Alex, Neil Fraser in Hong Kong, Micah in Las Vegas. Very, very, very good. Very, very good. Anybody else? Names and locations? Lots in Poland. Very good. Excellent, excellent, excellent. All righty. So now, the first super chat question I received said, what do you think communists should be doing to congeal interests between us, MAGA, and liberals? I am going to Google congeal. Right? Now, congeal, the definition that I just received of congeal is solidify, coagulate, especially by cooling, or take shape or coalesce in the form of a satisfying whole. That is the definition of congeal. So what should communists... Oh, we got Caitlin from Chicago. Always great. Alex from Brazil. Very good. Gavin in the home of John Deere. Carl in Washington. What should we be doing, the question is, to bring people together, ourselves, MAGA, and liberals? Well, my answer to that is put forward a program that many people from all of those camps could agree to. Put forward a program to improve the lives of people in the country that MAGA folks could agree to, that liberal folks could agree to, that we ourselves could agree to. And that has been the purpose of our 4-point plan. The 4-point plan of the Center for Political Innovation: a mass program to hire the unemployed to rebuild the United States. New infrastructure, new schools, new highways, new hospitals, high-speed railway, new universities, new power plants, new water treatment facilities, a complete high-tech makeover of America. Hire the people to rebuild this country, revamp this country, mass program of public works. Second point is public control and ownership of our natural resources. America's oil, America's coal, America's timber, America's natural gas. These things that are the fruits of the earth, of the soil of America, should be the property of all the people in the country. And the money that's made from American oil or American natural gas or coal or timber or other natural resources should be put into the public budget to pay for things like schools and hospitals and education. Public ownership of our natural resources. The third plank is public control of banking, a monopoly on credit in the hands of the state, so that money is lended strategically in accordance with a plan to improve the country's economy. If someone wants a mortgage loan to buy a house, they simply have to show that their house would improve the neighborhood, the community. They also have to show they're capable of repaying the loan, and they'll get the loan. If someone wants a loan to start a small business, they have to make a case that their loan will benefit the community, and they'll get their loan. And funds and money will be lended, and credit will be assigned strategically as part of an overall economic plan, rather than simply done by private money lending entities. Credit cards, mortgage loans, business loans, the lending of money will be done by the state and done strategically by state central planners. And the final item is an economic bill of rights for all citizens: the right to health care, the right to education, the right to housing, the right to employment. These things, such a program is what is needed to improve life in the country. That's what is needed. We need an economic program to improve life in the country. And I think there are people in the MAGA camp who would agree to this economic program. And I think that there are people in the liberal camp who would agree to such a program. I think there are people in the non-political camp who would agree to such a program. And putting forward such a program and telling people, we don't care what your position is on the trans issue. We don't care what your position is on critical race theory. We don't care what your position is on the Second Amendment. We don't care what your position is on, any issue. We are concerned. Are you for this program or are you against it? I think many, many, many people would be for it. And those who weren't for it, we could have a good discussion with. Why aren't you for it? And engage with them. And putting forward this program, this is the basis on which the population is won over. Every revolution that has ever happened in history, every moment where you've seen a communist organization win over the broad masses of people, it's been through their program. They put forward what they're for, what they advocate, what they are in favor of, and the population looks at it and they say, okay, we're for that too. Peace, land, and bread. That's what we ought to be doing. If you're looking to congeal and bring together people in different states and put them under communist leadership, that is what should be done. Okay, so now there's 2 super chats here, both of them people that I have never heard of. And so I'm going to Google both of them. John Kenneth Galbraith was the first one. It was a super chat asking me what I think of John Kenneth Galbraith. I have no idea who that is, so I'm going to Google it. John Kenneth Galbraith. He is a Canadian-American economist and public diplomat. It says, Wikipedia says, Ken Galbraith was a Canadian-American economist, diplomat, and public official. His book on economic topics were bestsellers in the 1950s through the 2000s. As an economist, he leaned toward post-Keynesian economics with an institutionalist perspective. Galbraith was a longtime Harvard faculty member All right. Sounds like he was an influence on Roosevelt, Truman, JFK, and Lyndon Johnson's administration. And he was the U.S. ambassador to India. All right. Very good. A Keynesian economist. All right. Well, I am a Marxist economist, but it sounds like he did have common sense. He wasn't an advocate of Austrian school economics. He did understand that there was a role for the state in stabilizing the economy. There you go. There you go. I mean, okay. And then the next super chat question was Sam Patton. Or Simon Patton. Now I'm going to look up Simon Patton. Simon Patton. Another economist. All right. Simon Patton was an economist, chair of the Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania. Patton was one of the first economists to posit a shift from economics of scarcity to economics of abundance. That is, he believed that there should be enough wealth to satisfy people's basic needs, and the economy would shift from an emphasis on production to consumption. Well, that sounds pretty agreeable to me. These are two economists that I am not familiar with. I have read the work of John Maynard Keynes. I have read the work of Adam Smith. I have read some of the work of Henry Carey, some of the work of Alexander Hamilton. I've read books on economics before. There's this one economist who's from South Korea that I really like. Let me see if I can pull his book here. I always forget his name, but I really like him. Yes, this guy. I really like this guy. This guy is really good. Hu John Chang. This guy is awesome, right? Hu John Chang, Economics, the User's Guide. Anything this guy publishes is very good. This guy is a Marxist, but he is not a woke, right? Yeah, I like this guy. I would recommend anything this guy puts out. It's very basic and to the point, but it's very educational, and it's from an anti-imperialist and pro-development, pro-China perspective. So there you go. All righty. Okay, so we got some super chats here. Writing them down. Is there a difference between industrial and national bourgeoisie? Right? Primo Levi. Another name for me to Google. And I live in a suburban area with limited corporate apartments. I'm interested in starting a tenants' rights movement. Do you have any suggestions? All righty. Very good. Very good. So now the next super chat question is, what is the backstory about Victor Boot? Missed my live stream. Well, you should watch my package, my RT package that I did on it. I interviewed Victor Boot from prison. Victor Boot, he owns a cargo company, and he's a Russian guy. He was part of the Soviet military. He was involved in the Soviet Union's international solidarity work with Angola, among other countries. And he owned a cargo company. At the time the Soviet Union fell, he ran a cargo company. And throughout the 90s, he ran a cargo company. And then in the late 90s, the British Foreign Office named him the Merchant of Death. And they declared that he was responsible for smuggling weapons all over the world, all kinds of stuff. He said that's not true, and then they made a Hollywood movie about him, which has nothing to do with reality. The way he put it in our interview, he said, they must have eaten some mushrooms, or he gave a very funny answer about that Hollywood movie. Go and listen to my interview with him. But they canceled him basically, even though he had not been convicted of any crime. They just announced, U.S. media announced, this guy is responsible for sending weapons all over the world, as if the CIA doesn't send. I mean, the USA is the world's greatest arms exporter. You do realize that. Like the Mexican drug cartels, they don't have guns from Victor Boot. They have guns from the CIA and from the United States. Like all over and right now, look at the flow of arms into Ukraine. It's like the amount of like ridiculous hypocrisy. But regardless, They made a movie about him, how awful he is. They made a movie, like a hit piece on him. And so then they assigned these FBI guys to go after him. And he hadn't broken any laws. He hadn't broken any U.S. laws. He had allegedly sold weapons in different countries. That's not illegal. He's not a U.S. citizen. He's from Russia. So he was living in Thailand. They sent 2 FBI guys to go meet with him. And the FBI guys were pretending to be members of the FARC, the Colombian rebel group. And they had a hypothetical conversation with him. And in that conversation, he didn't even say anything incriminating. It was kind of like okay, whatever. And based on the fact, they said, well, why didn't you slap them in the face? Why didn't you run out of there as soon as you heard they were in the FARC? Based on that, they arrested him in Thailand and they extradited him to the United States. And he was given a sham trial where he wasn't able to defend himself. And he was convicted. And then the judge at his sentencing even said that he's not the merchant of death. The judge who sentenced him, the woman, she even said at his sentencing, I'm not giving him the maximum sentence here. I mean, he could have gone to jail for the rest of his life without parole. She said that he's clearly not who Hollywood has made him out to be. It was all bullshit. And they were holding him for ransom because he's a prominent Russian, and I'm glad that he's free. And they do this. They did the same thing to Maria Butina. They grabbed Maria Butina, right? She had a boyfriend who was in the NRA. That's not a crime. She's a Russian citizen. She had a boyfriend who was in the NRA. That's it. And they held her in prison and they denied her, she was held in solitary confinement. And they just treated her so badly until it finally got to the point, they made a deal with her where she would plead guilty to being an unregistered lobbyist. Because she and her boyfriend, they met with, government officials because her boyfriend was a big NRA guy, and she pled guilty to being an unregistered lobbyist, right? Because she met with some officials when her boyfriend was in the NRA, and then they sent her back to Russia. Awful what they did to Maria Butina, right? What did she do? I mean, she's a Russian girl who has a boyfriend. And her boyfriend happens to be a gun guy, that's not a crime, completely ridiculous what they did to Maria Butina. This is what they do now. They grab people to put pressure on governments, right? And they grabbed Victor Bout and they grabbed Maria Butina, and it's awful. And it's a cowardly thing to do. But there you go. From my dad. Oh, I remember your father, Gavin. There's validity to the statement Republicans can't win with Trump and can't win without him. Good one. Can't win without him. All right. Very good. Very good question. All right. All right. And there's another super chat that went by, I think, right? Books on post-91 Russia. Oh, that's good. Books on post-91 Russia. All right. So that's the story of Victor Bout. Please talk about Ceausescu and his disagreements with Russia. Ceausescu was the leader of socialist Romania, right? Romania was a country. It still is a country, right, in Eastern Europe. And Romania was liberated from the Nazis by Soviet troops. The Workers' Party of Romania. It was a people's democracy. Many people don't remember this, but after the Soviet Union liberated countries from the Nazis, they didn't just put the communist parties in power. That's what everyone thinks happened. Is they marched in and they said, "Oh, we are Russians, you are communists now in charge of you. Do what they say or we kill you." That's not what happened, right? In Romania, there were a number of different groups, the Communist Party among them, some Christian groups, some social democratic groups. There were many different groups in Romania that had resisted the Nazis. So when the Soviet Union liberated Romania from the Nazis, they formed a coalition of those various different political groups in Romania who had fought against the Nazis, had been part of the resistance, right? And the Social Democrats and the Communists and the Christian pastors and the trade unions and ethnic groups and different organizations. They formed like a council. And out that council eventually merged into what was called the Workers' Party of Romania. And the Workers' Party of Romania became the new government. And it was called a people's democracy. They didn't call it a socialist society. They called it a people's democratic society that would eventually move towards socialism. And in the 1950s, the Soviet Union aided Romania, and they built new universities all over the country. They built new hospitals all over the country. Life expectancy, living conditions increased. And Ceausescu, who was a communist, became the head of state. He was a very popular, very popular leader, right? He's somebody who'd fought the Nazis. He was a communist, and he was the head of state. I believe in the late 60s, Ceausescu was this popular leader of Romania. He started to disagree with the Soviet Communist Party. He thought the Soviet Communist Party was not revolutionary enough. So he changed the name of the Romanian Workers' Party to the Communist Party. He said, we're no longer the Romanian Workers' Party, the People's Democratic Party. We're now the Romanian Communist Party. And he actually then moved ahead and made Marxism-Leninism the state ideology in Romania, which it hadn't been before. It had been a People's Democratic Coalition government. And then he was still Soviet aligned, but he was at that point more hardline than the Soviets. He was saying that, he was more in line with Fidel Castro, more in line with Che Guevara. He was in the Soviet camp, but he was more in the radical wing, like North Korea and Cuba. He was not a moderate, right? He was saying he thought Kosygin and Brezhnev were a little bit moderate. And so he was doing a more hardline position. So then in the 1980s, the United States started offering money to Romania, and U.S. banks started loaning money to Romania. They basically looked at the loans, the development loans the Soviet Union was giving Romania, and American banks said, well, we'll do better. And so Romania started taking out loans from American banks rather than from Soviet banks. And this was a policy that Zbigniew Brzezinski had dreamed up, right? This was one of their tactics, was to separate what they called satellite countries from the Soviet Union, right? Libya, for example. Jimmy Carter sent his brother, Billy Carter, to go become Gaddafi's drinking buddy, right? Gaddafi loved to party. Gaddafi was a bit of a party animal, and so was Billy Carter, Jimmy Carter's younger brother. So Billy Carter, who had his own brand of beer called Billy Beer. Billy Carter was going to Libya and partying with Gaddafi, right? And that was a way that the United States could nudge Libya to be a little bit further away from the Soviet Union. And it worked. And eventually Billy Carter became a registered agent of Libya. And you'll notice that when the Afghan war started, Gaddafi actually didn't support the Soviet Union and the People's Democratic Government of Afghanistan. His position on Afghanistan was he actually aligned with the United States against the Soviet Union. Rarely did Libya do that, but that was a situation where Jimmy Carter was sending his younger brother, and there was a feeling on the part of Gaddafi that, okay, maybe I have an in with the Carter administration, so maybe I should, and that was how they operated. And they did the same thing with Cuba with the Mariel boat lifts, where they arranged, I've heard otherwise, Gavin, but I mean, if Gaddafi was an observant Muslim, he wouldn't drink alcohol. So maybe I'm wrong, but there you go. Billy Carter certainly drank. I'll tell you that much. Had his own brand of beer. That was like a way of separating Libya from the Soviet Union. And Cuba, they arranged the Mariel boat lifts with Cuba, where Cuba sent a lot of dissidents as well as criminals from their prisons and other people. They sent them to Miami, and this is the strategy that Obama used. Obama was very hostile to Russia and China, but he was friendly to Iran and he was friendly to Cuba, right? He opened diplomatic relations with Cuba, and he did the Iran nuclear deal. And that this is the strategy that the Brzezinski foreign policy folks use, right? They want to separate what they call satellite countries from the superpowers, from the anti-imperialist superpowers. So Romania started getting loans from American banks, and Deng Xiaoping went to Romania a lot. And Deng Xiaoping was at that point aligned with the United States. China was doing its reform and opening up. American businesses were going into China. And Deng Xiaoping met with Ceausescu, and Ceausescu kind of drifted into, it was still a socialist country, but it was against the Soviet Union. And Poland was moving in similar directions. In the 80s, many countries in the Eastern Bloc started moving against the Soviet Union because they, there was a feeling that the Soviet Union had been condescending. And also you had Gorbachev, and Gorbachev wasn't really doing much to resist this. And that's what, the other thing is that Gorbachev was basically, these countries would start to move against it, and he'd say, okay, whatever. He pulled the troops, he started withdrawing US forces or Soviet forces from Afghanistan. And that Gorbachev was very much not an anti-imperialist. He was pro-imperialist. He thought Ronald Reagan and Maggie Thatcher were good people. And so you had a leadership in the Soviet Union that wasn't resisting. So U.S. influence started expanding across Eastern Europe in the 1980s. However, the debt that was imposed on Romania started to have very severe economic consequences. And actually, Romania started, the living standards in the 1980s started decreasing quite a bit. The population, because of the fact they had taken out so much debt from American banks, the population was, basically having to give up a lot of things to pay back these American loans. And then it all culminated in a coup where they dragged out Ceausescu and his wife, and they executed them. And they were executed. It was like they were shot, and there was a counter-revolutionary coup, and the population had no say in it. And it was just a faction in the Romanian military that had been aligned with the CIA, that had been penetrated. They got the memo. Now's the time to go. And they seized the presidential palace, and then they shot Romania. They shot Ceausescu and his wife. And it was a military coup. It was completely absurd. So there you go. One thing that's particularly interesting is that Sam Marcy and the Workers' World Party had a particularly interesting, they were particularly sympathetic to Romania because Romania had positioned itself as a more revolutionary country than the Soviet Union. And, Sam Marcy wrote a lot of articles about Ceausescu. And I also understand that the Democratic Workers' Party, which was a Maoist communist group led by Marlene Dixon, they had been aligned with China. And then they had broken with China as the free market reforms were happening. But in the 80s, Marlene Dixon, the leader of the Democratic Workers' Party, she was going to Romania and meeting with Ceausescu. And Ceausescu suggested that they become a think tank rather than a party. And so the Democratic Workers' Party started transitioning into becoming a peace think tank. They were going to become like a foundation in Washington, D.C. They had this whole plan. They were going to become like the American Council Against Militarism or something. And the DWP, the Democratic Workers' Party of Marlene Dixon, which was this Maoist feminist group, they started transitioning at the advice of Romania to becoming a think tank in Washington, D.C. that would oppose the military-industrial complex. And that's when they collapsed. And Marlene Dixon went to Romania, and then she came back, and they accused her of being a cult leader, and they accused the group of being a cult, and they voted to dissolve, and they dissolved, and they merged into DSA, and the group collapsed. A very strange story. But yeah, the Democratic Workers' Party, DWP, they were transitioning to become a think tank, and then they collapsed. Very weird. And one thing I've noticed is that Steve Hassan and his people have targeted the DWP. They hate the DWP. They're listed in all the books as a cult, as an extreme cult and stuff like that. They're a little bit of a strange group, I will be honest, right? Most of the Maoist groups during the 1970s and 80s maintained that homosexuality was bourgeois decadence, but the DWP was pro-LGBT. And they put feminism at the front. They were Maoist feminists, the DWP. And they did a lot of campaigns that were secretive. You wouldn't know the DWP existed. There was something called the Quality of Life campaign. And it was like a group that went around like protesting for welfare rights, protesting for single mothers, protesting for LGBT rights. And they were all over California. They were very big in California. And if you got friendly enough with them, they would somebody would take you aside and say, shh, we're actually the Democratic Workers' Party. We're a Maoist communist group. Don't tell anybody. That's how a lot of the Maoist communist groups operated and still operated. And it made sense back then. Okay. In the context of the Cold War, that made sense. Okay. When everyone's psyched up against communism, especially in the 80s after the Reagan Revolution. Okay. I get it. But nowadays for communist groups to be acting that way is just stupid. Okay. It's utterly stupid. There's no reason not to preach socialism at the top of your lungs right now. Preach socialism and anti-imperialism at the top of your lungs. And this thing where it's like, well, we're going to form we're going to form some kind of we're going to get jobs and unions and then secretly coordinate. I mean, what Freedom Road Socialist Organization and Liberation Road and honestly, even what Lerna does these days is very silly. Honestly, it's very, very, very silly. There is no reason to do that. None. Right? The masses are more pro-socialism, more anti-war than ever before. And we have plenty of liberal NGOs. Plenty. There's lots of liberal NGOs. There's lots of protesting going on. What there isn't is people pushing socialism and anti-imperialism. And instead, wokeism is out there, and the working class hates wokeism. So, all of this, we're going to form our secret club that secretly maneuvers with... Get rid of that. That is just stupid. It's stupid. The Democratic Workers' Party, from what I understand, they had a relationship with Romania. And I don't know, but I assume the Workers' World Party, because Sam Marcy wrote so many glowing articles where he just praised Ceausescu and such. I assume that the Workers' World Party had some kind of relationship with Romania, but I don't know that. I don't know if that's true or not, honestly. I wasn't alive during those years. I was born in 87. Well, I guess I was like 3 or something when all this happened. But yeah, the Workers' World Party was particularly sympathetic to Ceausescu, and so was the DWP. And then the DWP collapsed. So, and you'll notice that was a really common thing that happened. It's very similar to what was done to Jerry Healy and his group, right? They had a relationship with Libya and all of that. And then all of a sudden, allegations against the leader were all over the media, and then the group collapsed, right? This is a really common tactic for bringing down an organization, right? Is that, there's a charismatic person who's at the top of the group. And so they hit that person with allegations, and then they have a couple people planted in the group who then make the group collapse. This is a really common pattern. Really common, right? They did it to the Workers' Revolutionary Party of the UK. They did it to the Democratic Workers' Party of the DWP of Marlene Dixon. So this is how the intelligence operation is carried out. It's like a classic operation. They've been doing it since the 80s. And Steve Hassan and his people are always involved in it, right? They're always involved. So there you go. There you go. All right. Is there a difference between industrial capitalists and the national bourgeoisie? Yes. The national bourgeoisie refers to the leaders of... okay, let me back up. The term national bourgeoisie refers to the colonized world, right? It refers to countries in the colonized world. When a country is being colonized or is part of, under the domination of Western capitalism and imperialism, the bourgeoisie divides into two. And you have what's called the comprador bourgeoisie and what is called the national bourgeoisie. And the comprador bourgeoisie, they are in bed with the Western imperialists. And the national bourgeoisie are capitalists who are at odds with the Western imperialists. And that's what that refers to. In Venezuela, Hugo Chavez, originally when he came to office, was not a communist, but he was kind of a champion of the national bourgeoisie that was seeing the economy just destroyed by Western imperialism and the IMF loans. But he entered an alliance with the working class, and eventually the working class became the dominant force, and now Venezuela is a socialist country. But, the national bourgeoisie, that refers to the bourgeoisie that is anti-imperialist versus the comprador bourgeoisie that is pro-imperialist. Industrial capitalists, that term refers to capitalists who own factories, capitalists who make shit, right? As opposed to finance capitalists, which are capitalists who lend money, right? Capitalists who produce products are industrial capitalists, whereas capitalists who lend money are finance capitalists. And nowadays, I mean, one of the main points of Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism by Lenin, one of the main points of that book is that the industrial capitalists are under the boot heels of the finance capitalists, that they are dependent, and they basically, they are constantly being kicked around. They depend on loans from banks to keep functioning, and they don't really have the power. That the industrial capitalists are supplanted by the finance capitalists, and that's a necessary process for the development of imperialism. Finance capital becomes dominant over industrial capital. And in the United States, that mainly took the form of a lot of the big industrial capitalists went into banking, right? The Rockefellers, right? They were oil manufacturers. They had oil refineries. Well, they became bankers, right? The Morgans, again, Henry Morgan, it's General Electric, it's this industrial company. Well, they went into banking, right? Chase Bank it's the Rockefellers and the Morgans. It's JP Morgan Chase, right? So the big industrial capitalists, they became bankers, and other industrial capitalists became supplanted by them. That's what we're talking about there. So I hope that answers your question. All righty. Next question. Primo Levi. I don't know who Primo Levi is, but I'm going to look it up. All right. Primo Levi is an Italian chemist. I don't know my chemists. Primo Levi was an Italian chemist, partisan, writer, and Jewish Holocaust survivor. He is the author of several books, a collection of short stories, essays, and poems. Well, the partisan brigades were communists. That was the communist resistance in Italy. Sounds like an interesting dude, fighting the Nazis and writing novels, and sounds like an interesting fellow. I'll have to look into Primo Levi. I have not studied his work. Thank you for sending a super chat and making me aware of this Italian anti-fascist writer. So there you go. Someone says they're forming a tenants' rights movement. Do I have any suggestions? Yes, I do. First thing you need to remember if you're doing that is that states have very different laws regarding renting, right? New York City, in particular, even just the city of New York, has very specific renting laws about what you can put in a lease and what you can't, but it's very different in different states. Some states, landlords can do this. Some states, they can do that. The rights of tenants are very, very different in different states. So one thing you want to do is you want to find a lawyer who is familiar with working for tenants, or you want to find some kind of nonprofit that works on behalf of tenants, and go and get a fact sheet and get information, because tenant law is very specific. And then the other thing you want to do is you probably want to, meet people in your building, kind of call a meeting, meet with people, find out what people's grievances are. One thing that a lot of tenant associations do is that they form like a hotline of some kind that people can call. That's a really common thing that happens, and there are some nonprofits around the country that do work around the rights of tenants, but it's very different no matter where you go. It depends what part of the country you're in. So the main thing, I think the first step you need to do is you need to get a tenants' rights fact sheet of some kind. You need to find out the laws in your state. And perhaps if you're looking to organize the people in your building, if you find out the laws in your state and what the rights of tenants are in your state specifically, I would make a fact sheet and distribute it throughout the people in your building. I think that's the first thing, right? Because often people don't know what their rights are, right? In some states you don't have very many rights. Some states you have more rights, but often people just don't know what they are. And that landlords will do all kinds of dirty tricks, right? There are things that landlords will do that are very illegal, and they will always try to do them. In some states there are limits on the amount of fines they can make people pay, but they will try to fine you more than that just to see if they can get away with it. If you don't know your rights, right? If the law is that if your rent is a week late and they can fine you $50 for it, they might try to fine you $100 just to see if they can get away with it, because they might be able to get away with it, right? And that landlords often do try to do things like that. There are laws, and if you look at, I remember looking over the tenants' rights laws in New York State, and like a lot of the things that are illegal that landlords do are downright evil. They are downright evil, these things. I would have never even thought of that. Confiscating people's property for late rent. This is a nasty thing that landlords do. Apparently, there's a law against it. If they do this now, they can't do it. But apparently it was common back in the day that if your rent was late, the landlord would have a key to your apartment, would go into your apartment and take something and say, well, I'm taking that because your rent is late. Can you believe such a thing? What a nasty thing to do. But, you know, the landlord has the power, you know, and in a lot of cases, tenants are afraid to say anything. You know, they're afraid to insert their rights. I can't imagine such a thing. There's a specific law on the New York Code that says landlords cannot confiscate tenants' property for late paying of rent. I mean, can you believe that? Right? That they would, oh, you know, well, you know, I want a new TV and your rent is late. So I just went into your apartment while you were at work today and I took your TV because, you know, your rent is late. What are you going to do about it? I mean, that's apparently landlords used to do things like that. And people didn't like it for obvious reasons. So there you go. There you go. All right. That's my suggestion. Now, this is a question from Paul. Republicans can't win with Trump and can't win without him. Valid statement. Yeah, it is a weird situation because on the one hand, I mean, why be a Republican now? Right? I mean, they're trying to do this thing with DeSantis where like DeSantis is not woke. And aren't you mad about wokeness? Aren't you mad about political correctness? Well, DeSantis, he passed a law against communism and he passed a law against transgender stuff in Florida. Vote for him. He's not woke, but he's not Trump. DeSantis isn't Trump, right? DeSantis isn't Trump. But Trump, on the other hand, after January 6th, I really, really doubt the political establishment will let Donald Trump participate in an election. You know, I feel like for Donald Trump to be allowed to be a participant in this upcoming election, it will require a huge, huge amount of pressure being put on the power structure. And honestly, I feel like, you know, so many Republicans, I'm not sure Ted Cruz and others would even allow it, right? I feel like because of January 6th, there will be huge efforts to prevent Donald Trump from being a candidate, a real candidate in the upcoming elections. It may be they don't even let him on the Republican debate stage. It may be that they basically make a deal with him that we can prosecute you to prevent you from running. But I think that for Donald Trump to be allowed to be a real candidate in this upcoming election, that's going to be very difficult. However, Trump would be way more likely to win than any other candidate on the Republican camp. I'll be honest with you. Trump has that radical energy. DeSantis doesn't. Ted Cruz doesn't. Right? Trump has this radical energy that could actually win, whereas Donald Trump does not. Whereas the others don't. Trump has that radical energy and the others don't. So if the Republicans wanted to win, they would put Trump as their candidate. But I feel like because of January 6th and because so much of Trump's party has turned against him and such, there will be every effort to try and prevent that from happening. What I think is going to happen, I'll be honest with you. I've got two theories. My first theory is that they're waiting to pull out the stops for the new Democratic superstar. All right, the new Obama, the new Bill Clinton is being prepped in the back room. It's someone we've never heard of, and they're going to come out of nowhere to be a superstar. That's one theory. But honestly, the way things are going with the Hunter Biden laptop revelation now and with the Twitter revelations, maybe it'll be a Republican. Maybe they've got a new, very charismatic Republican that we don't know about. Maybe the Obama that they roll out will actually be a Republican this time. They'll figure, the woke stuff has alienated so many people. Biden has been such a bad president. There'll be a neocon that they roll out who is sexy and, captures the energy of an Obama. But I feel like that'll be difficult as well because Republicans are very much the party of old people. They're the party of old people in red states, right? So you're going to have a sexy person who appeals to old people in red states. That's going to be difficult, right? But I feel like they've got a plan right now. There are some people that are going to be rolled out that we've not heard of. There are some They've got, they're like Frankenstein, Dr. Frankenstein, and they're in the back room. They're going to have a new monster for us for the 24 elections. They're going to have a new monster to roll out. They'll shout, "It's alive! It's alive!" And lightning will strike, and they'll have a new monster for us. But they can't win with DeSantis. They don't want to let Trump do it. Biden certainly isn't going to run again because he's, I mean, it's just, it's like an airplane going down. It's like crashing and burning, the Biden administration is, I mean, it's just getting more pathetic each day and people are getting more and more upset. Not quite sure what's going to happen, but I feel like they have to have somebody in the back room because right now, yeah, Trump would be the only candidate, but they're going to do everything they can to prevent Trump. So there you go. There you go. And the last super chat I've got here is books on Russia post 91. Get ready because we got them. We got them. First book on Russia post 1991 that we've got. The Shock Doctrine by Naomi Klein. Very widely read book, but there's a whole section on Russia, the fall of the Soviet Union, and austerity. Next book on Russia and since 1991, Europe since 1989 by Philip Thayer. Very good book, full of information, full of details about neoliberalism and austerity. Next, Genocide, Russia and the New World Order by Sergei Glaziev. Very good book by a respected Russian economist. And The Anatomy of Russian Capitalism by Stanislav Menshikov, another respected Russian economist. And while we're at it, I actually enjoyed this book. It's kind of an obscure book, Youth Politics in Putin's Russia. And it's about Putin's efforts to mobilize the young people with the new Russian patriotism. I actually really enjoyed this. It's an academic study of the Nashi youth organizations that Putin's been building up among Russian young people to be patriotic, to love their country, to be anti-imperialist. So there's that. So, yeah, I hope that's helpful. I mean, there's probably a few more books I could name, but those are the books that are within arm's reach on that topic. So there you go. I hope that was helpful. Very good. All right, folks. Well, it's been a good night. I guess we will end the stream here. A new upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression, but the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. While the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. Out of the movement to the masses. Out of the movement to the masses. Out of the movement to the masses. Dare to struggle, dare to win. Dare to struggle, dare to win. A new upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared. Revolution is the main trend in the world today. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. Good night.